They called her just a contractor and ignored her warnings about the Taliban ambush. The cocky Special Forces team at Bagram Air Base thought some civilian analyst couldn't understand real combat until IEDs started exploding exactly where she predicted. And suddenly everyone realized the computer nerd had been watching this valley through Predator drones longer than they'd been deployed to Afghanistan. The thin mountain air of Afghanistan carried the constant hum of generators and aircraft engines across Bagram Air Base as Sarah Mitchell walked toward the nondescript trailer that housed the most lethal remote warfare capability in military history. The MQ-1 Predator Operations Center looked unremarkable from the outside, just another temporary building among hundreds scattered across the sprawling base. To the Special Forces operators preparing for their next direct action mission, she was just another civilian contractor who stared at computer screens while they risked their lives in the field. At 32 years old, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and wire-rimmed glasses that marked her as technical personnel, Sarah looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, an intelligence analyst who processed drone footage while others conducted real operations. She wore civilian clothes with a contractor badge, her understated appearance designed to maintain the cover story that kept her actual mission classified from all but the highest security level. What the Special Forces teams didn't know was that Sarah had been piloting MQ-1 Predator drones over Afghanistan and Pakistan for 8 years, conducting some of the most sensitive targeted killing operations in the history of warfare. Her classified logbook contained over 4,200 hours of combat flight time, including 387 Hellfire missile strikes against high-value targets throughout the region. Her transition to intelligence analysis was cover for a new mission, using her unprecedented knowledge of Taliban tactics to support ground operations in areas where she'd been conducting drone strikes for nearly a decade. The morning briefing called for a direct action raid against a suspected Taliban weapons cache in the Korengal Valley, one of the most dangerous areas in Afghanistan. A 12-man Special Forces team would conduct the operation, supported by conventional air assets and intelligence from multiple sources. The target had been identified through signals intelligence and human sources, presenting what appeared to be a routine mission for experienced operators. Master Sergeant Mike Torres led the team, a veteran of 6 deployments with extensive experience in Afghan operations. His men were equally seasoned, having conducted hundreds of similar raids throughout their multiple combat tours. All were skilled warriors who'd learned to survive in an environment where every mission could be their last. But as Sarah reviewed the mission plan, she noticed details that triggered alarm bells based on her years of drone surveillance in the exact target area. The proposed insertion route, timing, and extraction plan all showed characteristics that she'd seen Taliban forces exploit in previous operations. "Sergeant Torres, I have concerns about your approach route," Sarah said during the final briefing, her voice carrying the professional tone of someone trying to be heard over military hierarchy. The valley floor shows recent disturbance patterns consistent with IED emplacement. Torres glanced at the intelligence photos she'd provided, seeing nothing but rocky terrain that looked identical to every other Afghan valley he'd operated in. "Ma'am, we've reviewed all available intelligence. The route is clear according to our sources." Sarah pulled up additional imagery from her classified files, showing subtle changes in ground patterns that indicated recent excavation and concealment activities. These disturbance signatures are consistent with explosive device preparation. I've observed similar patterns in this area before. "Ma'am, with respect, you're a contractor who analyzes photos. We're the ones who actually go out there and face the enemy. We know what we're looking at." The dismissive tone was familiar to Sarah, who'd spent years trying to protect ground forces using information they couldn't officially know she possessed. Her drone operations were classified at levels that prevented her from explaining how she'd watched Taliban forces prepare ambushes in this exact location dozens of times over the past several years. She continued studying the mission plan, recognizing tactical patterns that indicated the weapons cache might be bait for a complex ambush. Taliban forces had been using fake intelligence to lure American forces into prepared killing zones, and this operation showed multiple characteristics of such a trap. "Sergeant Torres, I strongly recommend adjusting your timeline and approach vector. The target site shows indicators of recent Taliban activity that suggest possible ambush preparation." Torres's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Ma'am, we have our orders and our intelligence. We're not changing mission parameters based on contractor concerns about photo analysis." 4 hours later, Torres's team inserted via helicopter into what they believed was an unobserved landing zone. The Special Forces operators moved with practiced stealth through terrain they'd studied extensively, following routes that should have provided concealment from enemy observation. But Sarah was watching their movement through live Predator feed from 20,000 feet above, seeing Taliban fighters positioning themselves exactly where her years of experience had predicted they would be. The enemy had allowed the helicopter insertion to proceed unopposed, waiting for the ground team to move into the kill zone that had been prepared weeks in advance. Bagram Control, this is Overwatch, Sarah radioed using her official call sign. I have eyes on multiple armed individuals in concealed positions along the target route. Recommend immediate halt to ground movement. Torres received the warning but dismissed it as typical contractor paranoia. Overwatch, we're not seeing any threats on our scopes. Continuing to objective. Sarah watched helplessly as the Special Forces team moved directly into the carefully prepared ambush site, their night vision and thermal equipment unable to detect Taliban fighters who'd been positioned for optimal tactical advantage. Bagram Control, Overwatch has positive identification of enemy forces in prepared positions. Ground team is walking into a complex ambush. Recommend immediate extraction. Overwatch, maintain observation. Ground team has tactical control. 10 minutes later, the valley erupted in coordinated explosions as Taliban forces detonated multiple IEDs while simultaneously engaging the Special Forces team with small arms and rocket-propelled grenades. The ambush was perfectly executed, catching Torres's team in a killing zone with limited cover and no easy escape routes. Contact! Contact! We're taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Torres's voice carried the strain of a leader who'd realized his team was in serious danger. Sarah was already coordinating Predator strikes against Taliban positions she'd been tracking for the past hour. Her years of experience in this exact area allowed her to identify and engage enemy fighters with surgical precision while avoiding friendly fire incidents. Bagram Control, Overwatch is engaging hostile forces with Hellfire missiles. Danger close to friendly positions. The first missile struck a Taliban machine gun position that had been pinning down Torres's team, creating an opportunity for tactical movement. Sarah's follow-up strikes systematically eliminated enemy positions based on her intimate knowledge of how Taliban forces position themselves in this terrain. How does Overwatch know exactly where these guys are? One of Torres's men asked over the radio, as Sarah's missiles continued to eliminate threats with impossible accuracy. Sarah's response was professionally neutral. I've been observing this area for an extended period. The enemy uses predictable positioning pattern. The engagement continued for 40 minutes, with Sarah providing precision fire support that allowed Torres's team to fight their way out of the ambush and reach a safe extraction zone. Her strikes were perfectly coordinated with ground movement and time to achieve maximum suppression of enemy fire. After extraction, Torres approached Sarah with questions that had been building throughout the firefight. How did you know exactly where every Taliban position was located? That wasn't normal intelligence analysis. Sarah looked up from her workstation, where multiple screens showed continuing surveillance of the area they'd just evacuated. Sergeant, I've been watching that valley for a very long time. I know how the enemy operates there. Watching through what? Satellite imagery doesn't give that kind of real-time tactical awareness. For the first time, Sarah's cover story began to crack slightly. I've been involved in operations in that area before. The patterns become recognizable after sufficient observation. Torres studied her more carefully, noting details he'd missed during their earlier interactions. You're not just a contractor, are you? Sergeant, some operations require different types of coverage and different types of personnel. What matters is that your team made it home safely. The mission debrief revealed that Sarah had conducted 23 precision strikes during the engagement, all successful with 0 civilian casualties. Her tactical analysis of Taliban positioning had been accurate to within meters, allowing her to neutralize threats while protecting friendly forces. Word of the operation spread quietly through the Special Forces community at Bagram. The story of the contractor who'd saved an entire team using impossibly accurate intelligence became required study material for units operating in Taliban-controlled areas. The next week, Torres specifically requested Sarah for intelligence support on all high-risk operations. Her ability to predict Taliban tactics and coordinate precision strikes proved invaluable for Special Forces teams operating in areas where the enemy had significant tactical advantages. But Sarah never revealed the true scope of her drone operations. She understood that remote warfare often remained classified, and that some of the most effective warriors were those whose contributions couldn't be officially acknowledged. Her intelligence analysis cover provided the perfect explanation for knowledge that actually came from years of combat operations using platforms that didn't officially exist in many areas. During briefings for new special forces teams deploying to Afghanistan, she would often remind them that modern warfare required understanding enemies who'd adapted to American tactics over years of conflict. The Taliban aren't random insurgents, she would tell them. They're experienced fighters who've learned to counter our advantages, respect their capabilities, and trust all available intelligence sources. Months later, when Taliban forces launched coordinated attacks across the region, American response operations relied heavily on targeting intelligence that Sarah had developed during years of drone surveillance. Her understanding of enemy leadership networks and tactical patterns proved critical for disrupting Taliban operations before they could achieve strategic success. Years later, special forces operators throughout Afghanistan would credit Sarah with revolutionizing their approach to intelligence analysis in complex terrain. They learned that the most valuable tactical knowledge often came from sources they couldn't officially acknowledge, and that expertise in modern warfare existed in forms that traditional ground forces might not recognize. The MQ-1 Predator continued to conduct precision strikes throughout the region, flown by pilots whose expertise remained invisible to the forces they protected. Sarah's story reminded everyone that modern warfare required collaboration between warriors who faced enemies in different ways, and that the most critical victories were often achieved by people whose contributions had to remain secret. Sarah's influence on Special Forces operations remained classified, but her tactical intelligence ensured that hundreds of operators benefited from lessons learned during thousands of hours of remote combat operations. She had chosen mission success over recognition, understanding that the most important battles were often fought by people whose weapons were fired from continents away.